Václav Novák sent 20 Czech resistance fighters to kill Bumpy Johnson. Only 6 walked out, and the message they delivered made the most feared Czech commander in New York abandon his empire and flee to Prague forever. September 28, 1947. Bumpy Johnson was outnumbered 20-1. Václav Novák had sent his deadliest crew, Pavel the Shadow, Božena the Wolf, Tomáš the Silent, Marie the Ghost. 16 more Czech partisans, whose names were whispered in fear from Prague to Brooklyn. They cornered Bumpy in the Cotton Club basement. No witnesses, no way out. Bumpy was 42 years old, king of Harlem but facing battle-hardened resistance fighters. Novák was the most connected Czech commander in New York. Everyone expected the same ending, Bumpy Johnson dead in a basement. But what Novák didn't know, Bumpy Johnson understood liberation better than most Czechs. 4 hours later, only 6 of those 20 fighters walked out alive, and they delivered a message that made Václav Novák abandon his territory and disappear forever. This is the story of the night. Bumpy Johnson reminded Czech fighters what they really fought for. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand Václav Novák. He was a former Czech partisan who'd fought against the Nazis during World War II, conducting sabotage operations in the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. When the war ended and the Communists took power in 1948, Novák fled to New York with dozens of other Czech resistance veterans. By 1947, Novák controlled the Lower East Side Czech community with military precision. His fighters weren't typical gangsters. They were partisans who'd survived Nazi occupation, who'd blown up German supply lines with nothing but courage and determination. Men and women who understood sacrifice, resistance, and absolute loyalty to their cause. But there was a problem. Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy had been expanding his operations into the Lower East Side since 1946, establishing protection services for Czech businesses, helping Czech refugees navigate American immigration, offering security from anti-immigrant violence. To Novák, this wasn't business cooperation. This was invasion. A black American protecting Czechs was insulting to everything the resistance had fought for. March 1947. Novák sent emissaries to Bumpy. The message was clear. Stay out of Czech territory or face the consequences of crossing Czech resistance veterans. Bumpy sent back a response that made Novák's blood boil. Tell Václav that truth fighters don't threaten other truth fighters. April 1947. Novák tried intimidation. He convinced Czech restaurant owners to refuse service to Bumpy's people. He pressured Czech factory workers to strike against businesses under Bumpy's protection. He spread rumors that Bumpy was working with government agents. Bumpy responded by opening a refugee assistance program for Czech families. Free legal help, job placement, and protection from ethnic discrimination in the heart of Czech Manhattan. May 1947. Novák escalated. He sent 10 fighters to destroy the assistance program office. They came back unconscious, tied up, and left at a Catholic church with a note. Real resistance fighters protect refugees. They don't abandon them. By September 1947, Novák was getting pressure from other Czech veterans. His inability to control the Harlem problem was making Czech resistance fighters look weak. Czech partisans didn't tolerate weakness. So Novák made a decision that would end his leadership. He assembled 20 of his most battle-tested veterans, men and women who'd survived Nazi occupation, who'd fought Wehrmacht troops in the Bohemian forests, who'd killed fascists, and would kill for Czech honor. The plan was simple. Corner Bumpy Johnson on Czech Statehood Day. Execute him brutally. Send a message that protecting Czechs was Czech business only. September 27, 1947. The 20 fighters gathered at Novák's warehouse in Lower Manhattan. These weren't street criminals. Pavel had destroyed 15 German munitions depots with explosives. Božena had led mountain raids against Nazi patrols. Marie had survived Gestapo interrogation without breaking. They were heroes who'd lost their way. Novák briefed them personally. Bumpy Johnson has insulted Czech honor for the last time. He must be eliminated completely. What are his crimes against the Czech nation? Asked Tomáš, the silent. He protects our people without permission. He makes Czechs dependent on Black American charity. He undermines our community's sovereignty. The fighters accepted their mission. They'd been following Novák since arriving in America. They trusted his leadership completely. September 28, 1947, 11:15 p.m., Czech Statehood Day. Independence celebrated, but independence would be tested in Harlem. 20 Czech fighters moved through Manhattan like ghosts. They disabled security, cut communications, positioned themselves with military precision around the Cotton Club. Pavel picked the lock using skills learned breaking into German headquarters. The 20 fighters descended the stairs in perfect silence, professional resistance veterans executing a military operation. They found Bumpy sitting alone, reading a Czech newspaper, drinking bisharovka. He looked up as they formed a semicircle around him. 20 weapons pointed at his head. Václav Novák sends his regards, Pavel announced, his Czech accent thick with authority. Bumpy folded his newspaper slowly. He looked around the semicircle of fighters, studying their faces carefully. Then he spoke in perfect Czech. 20 bojovníků na zabití jednoho muže, Bumpy said. 20 warriors to kill one man. The fighters froze. Bumpy Johnson speaking Czech was impossible. But what he said next changed everything. J22, called by Chetel Jan Hus. Bumpy continued. Is this what Jan Hus would have wanted? Pavel lowered his weapons slightly. How do you know about Hus? Znam historii Českého odporu, Bumpy replied. I know the history of Czech resistance, because I understand fighting for truth against impossible odds. Božena stepped forward. You dare speak our martyr's name. I speak about resistance, because I am a resistance fighter, Bumpy said, standing slowly. You fought the Nazis to liberate Czechoslovakia. I fight oppression to protect my community. We're both truth fighters. Marie was confused. But you're interfering with Czech community affairs. I'm protecting Czech refugees from the same forces that occupied your homeland, Bumpy corrected. The same people who collaborated with the Nazis are the ones pressuring your businesses now. Bumpy reached into his jacket, 20 weapons aimed at him, but he moved slowly, carefully. He pulled out a small object and placed it on the table. It was a Czech resistance ribbon, red, white, and blue, with the words Pravda Vitezi. A friend gave me this in Alcatraz, Bumpy said quietly. Czech resistance fighter, named František Bednář, fought with partisans against the Germans, died in prison defending his principles. Pavel stared at the ribbon. František Bednář. You knew him? He was my cell leader in the forests. Taught me everything about fighting for truth. He taught me something too, Bumpy said. He taught me that resistance fighters protect all people seeking truth, not just their own. The basement went completely silent. 20 Czech veterans suddenly questioning everything they thought they knew. What are you saying? Božena asked. I'm saying Václav Novák isn't fighting for Czech liberation. He's fighting to control Czechs, the same way the Germans controlled them. Tomáš spoke for the first time in months. But Novák led us to freedom. Novák led you away from your principles, Bumpy replied. You're not fighting for Czech truth anymore. You're fighting to keep Czechs isolated and vulnerable. Marie looked around at her comrades, professional fighters but also Czechs raised on stories of resistance and liberation for truth. What proof do you have? Marie asked. Bumpy gestured to the resistance ribbon. Look at what's sewn beneath the Czech colors. Pavel examined the ribbon carefully. Sewn in small letters were the words Pro Všechny, Kol Hledají Pravdu. František believed that Czech freedom meant freedom for everyone seeking truth. Bumpy continued. Not just freedom for Czechs, but freedom from oppression everywhere. For the next 2 hours, 20 Czech fighters listened as Bumpy explained how oppression had followed them to America. How controlling their community was the same as occupation. How fighting other oppressed peoples only helped their common enemy. He's right, Božena said quietly. We've become what we fought against in Czechoslovakia. Pavel studied the resistance ribbon. What do you propose we do? Take this ribbon back to Novák. Tell him it came from František Bednář's student. Tell him that Czech resistance fighters don't abandon people seeking truth. One by one, the 20 fighters filed back up the basement stairs, but not all of them. 14 men and women left the Cotton Club that night. 6 stayed behind. Why? Bumpy asked. Because you reminded us what we liberated Czechoslovakia for, Pavel replied. The next morning, Pavel the Shadow walked into Novak's warehouse and placed the Czech resistance ribbon on his table. Where is Bumpy Johnson? Novak demanded. Alive. What do you mean, alive? I sent 20 fighters. Pavel's voice carried the authority of the Bohemian forests. You sent 20 freedom fighters to abandon another community seeking truth. We remembered what we really stand for. Novak stood up, his face red with rage. How dare you question my leadership? How dare you betray the resistance? Pavel replied. Bumpy Johnson understands Czech liberation better than you do. The room went dead silent. Novak's other associates watched as Pavel delivered the message that would end their leader's control. František Bednář died fighting for truth for everyone. You've become someone who suppresses truth. We won't be part of it. And if I report this to the other partisan commanders, Pavel looked around the room at Novak's remaining supporters, men and women who'd heard about the resistance ribbon, who understood what it meant. Then you'll discover that some Czech fighters remember what we really liberated Czechoslovakia from. 3 days later, Václav Novák boarded a ship to Hamburg, then traveled overland to Prague. He never returned to New York. The 6 fighters who stayed behind became trusted allies in Bumpy's organization. They helped establish Czech refugee assistance programs, anti-discrimination networks, and truth protection services. And that Czech resistance ribbon? Bumpy kept it in his office for the rest of his life, a reminder that liberation recognizes no borders, and resistance fighters protect all people seeking truth. September 28, 1947. 20 fighters walked into a basement to preserve Czech isolation. 14 walked out, having remembered what liberation means. And the 6 who stayed proved that Czech courage meant fighting for truth, not suppressing it. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's showing them they're betraying everything they once fought for. If this story of liberation, transcending borders, moved you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you believe resistance fighters protect all oppressed peoples, and comment below, what would you have done in that basement?